Hello, Unreal fans. We hope you have had a wonderful week. In the coming months, our teams are heading to Seattle and New York City for our annual Dev Days, where we'll provide insight into the Unreal Engine roadmap, a preview of our open world features, workflows for large-scale teams and projects, and share the latest from our Seattle-based XR team. We'll also host the very first Unreal Indie Dev Day in Seattle, where our presenters will provide need-to-know info about the Unreal Engine ecosystem, best practices, as well as the latest features in the newly released 423. Register now. Developed by Milestone SRL, the Motogp series has long been revered as one of the premier motorcycle racing game franchises ever created. Their latest installment, Motogp 19, kicks it into high gear by leveraging machine learning to create realistic AI that learns to race like us, which ensures the AI is both ruthless and fair. Find out how they balanced making a realistic hardcore racing simulator that's also accessible to newcomers, how the studio used reference images to strive for photorealistic presentation, and how the team faithfully recreated real-world tracks and motorcycles. The 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup captivated fans around the world over the course of its 30-day broadcast, reaching over 1 billion total viewers for the first time in the tournament's history. Broadcaster Fox Sports, in addition to its creative vendors Drive Studio and Decagon, utilized Unreal Engine for various components of the broadcast, from set design through to on-air graphics, ensuring photoreal environments and the ability to dynamically change graphics on the fly. Find out more about how the team virtually explored the set in advance, how the real team scene enabled shots that would be impossible to obtain in real life, and more. The first company to use Unreal Engine in broadcast, Zero Density, provides unique and visually stunning broadcast experiences to millions of viewers with Reality Engine, its photorealistic virtual studio and augmented reality solution powered by Unreal. With its advanced real-time node-based compositing tools and proprietary reality keyer technology, the system takes the sophistication and flexibility of a post-production workflow and provides it in a robust broadcast solution. Recently, Indonesian-born Brian Lesiangi completed his thesis project, Balinese Temple, as part of his master's program at Savannah College of Art and Design. His goal? To use environments to tell a story without the need for a character. Learn about his development process from blocking and art direction to final renders while he shares helpful tips and tricks along the way. We want to share a quick reminder that we still want to see your storytelling abilities in our Unreal Film Jam. Submit a short film or animation based on the theme, Oh, the Places You'll Go, by October 19th for your chance at $5,000, personalized project reviews with Blur Studio, the creators of Love, Death, and Robots, and Epic Games, and other prizes. On to our weekly Karma earners, those of you jumping in and helping your fellow developers on Answer Hub. Shout outs to Adno, Noel Hoge, Clockwork Ocean, Shadow River, Expose, Christoph Morva, MCX292, Mighty Enigma, Colder 347, and Amneri. Thank you all so much for what you do. This unique title, Edoria, is our first spotlight of the week, a multiplayer board game styled RTS. In Edoria, you join one of 4 factions, build a strong nation, and conquer the surrounding lands with resources acquired from other players. Join their Discord, and you can get ready for their alpha. Have you ever thought of running a shop in a medieval fantasy world? Well, now's your chance in Fantasy Little Jobs VR. You can cook hearty meals, forge weighty weapons, prepare magic potions, and even test your archery skills. It's an impressive project for a single developer and filled to the brim with fun mechanics to explore. Go check it out on Steam today. From developer Continue Break comes a vehicle rigging add-on for Blender. Speed up your vehicle rigging process by using object pickers to select vehicle parts and then click Rig Vehicle, making rigging almost as easy as keyless entry. That's all for this week. Thank you for joining for our news and community spotlight.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Unreal Engine livestream. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and with me today, I've invited technical writer Tim Hobson. Thanks for coming back.
Sure.
It's a pleasure to have you again. And just like last time Tim was on, we're going to talk a little bit about the quality of life improvements and some of the sort of lesser known, does not require a full live stream features that have come out in 4.23. And I don't think we have much more of an intro to go with. Yeah. And I know that everyone is excited to just sort of dig in.
Yeah, so before we dive in, just to go ahead and give you an idea of what what our main focus is going to be in this stream. It's like we're going to do the HDRI Backdrop asset, which is this whole visualization for products, and you can even use it for games and other assets. We also have from material expression node, we'll look at some of that, and then we'll look at dual height fog and a quick setup on that, and then we'll look at some of the new Foliage Actor types that we have, which are really
awesome.
Cool, so.
And we'll try to answer your questions around 4.23 as well. Just make sure you throw them in chat with the brackets in question, and then hopefully we might be able to answer them.
yeah, hopefully. Depends on if it's in my or Victor's wheelhouse, but we'll do our best.
We'll do our best. We always do our best.
I've read the release notes, so I can probably make my way through some of it. Okay, so let's go ahead and just jump into the editor. I'm going to show you we're going to start off with the HDRI Backdrop asset. And I just wanted to show you the scene before, and then we'll just do a quick setup. So this is just one that I used actually for the docs, and it's just our asset. I've got a scene set up here with or a static mesh that I got off of NASA's website, which is really cool because they provide like all their satellites and things like that for free. And me not being like a 3D modeler or artist, and just want to put a game asset, this is really kind of something really cool I can just toss in the editor really quickly. So if I go to play, you can see here is like we can do those kind of things, and everything updates in real time. We've got shadow catching here on the ground surface, which is something before, like when you had like a sky sphere and you just applied HDRI, you didn't get that.
Okay.
So you can really do some of those kind of things, and we have some, since it's all in a blueprint, we can edit some of those features and settings. So, and it all works with ray tracing too. We're not showing ray tracing in this stream, but it all works with ray tracing. It looks so amazing, like all the reflections and everything. So. Let's go ahead and get out of this one I've already created. We're just going to create a new level, and I'm going to create a blank one here.
And to clarify, the HDRI Backdrop assets, you need to enable the plugin to have them in your
project,
project,
I'm going to go through all that in just a second.
Okay, okay.
I'm trying to jump ahead, man.
Sorry. Just making sure we get everything.
My notes over here.
Your notes.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got this blank scene here. And this is where we're going to do all of our setup. And just to preface, I start out with a blank scene because once we enable the HDRI Backdrop, it has a skylight already with it, so you don't have to add any lighting unless you want to do, if you wanted to just use the backdrop itself for the HDRI image. But the way to enable it is we go up here to Edit and then Plugins. If you remember during the previews, if you participated, it's like this was originally enabled by default. And it wasn't actually a part of the plugin, but we moved it later in that release. So if you just search HDRI, you'll find this, enable it, and then just restart the editor, and everything will be there. And all we have to do is come over to our modes panel here. And then when you search HDRI, you'll be able to find it where it was originally as location. And then all you need to really do is just drag it right into the scene, and you've got everything kind of set up here for you that we can start messing with. And I'm going to go to my content browser. And sorry, one second. Find my static mesh for Juno. Oh, there we are.
We did change the setup here a little bit to give you an easier time looking at the monitor. It's still difficult though, because it's a little far.
So one of the things too, like once you get your asset in here and everything, you'll notice everything is kind of skewed depending on your perspective, and that's just kind of the way everything is set up for depending on the type of mesh we're using. So I'm going to select my HDRI Backdrop. I've got my actor in here that I want to use as my static mesh to visualize. And then in the HDRI Backdrop, sorry, one second. Let me just scrunch some of these up. In my HDRI Backdrop here, I've got my scene. I've got the skylight, which is controlling some of the ambient lighting already happening here. And even if I rotate my actor, all the reflections and everything are updating on those. And again, just select my backdrop. The next thing down here is the geometry. So with the majority of the HDRI images that you're going to use, we have the Enviro Sky Dome is the default one. And you can find a couple of the other meshes under here. So if we go, be sure that since everything is contained in a plugin, if we go to View Options, Show Engine Content is the first thing you need enabled. And what it's going to do is it's going to show all these folders here. But the next one you need as well is the Show Plugin Content, and that's going to show the content as, that we need for this HDRI plugin. So if I come up here to Browse, I can search Enviro. Get rid of that View Options. And you'll see that we have a couple of options here that we can choose from. Like for instance, like the box is more of a squared one with some soft edges that are rounded. You may be able to see it over here in the details panel, and you can see that it's got some of those chamfered and smooth edges. Can work really well for like studio environments and those kind of like gray backgrounds or something if you want like a constant color. We also have some that are like a box sharp, which gives you really sharp edges, and for something like a that I'll show in a second, for one that we're going to set up our HDRI image and show some of the settings that we need to adjust there, that would probably work really well because it's more of like a normal room that has those sharper edges that we can adjust, and it doesn't have to look like a dome or rounded. So, whoops. Just reset that back to the Sky Dome. So just going through some of the other settings that we do have here, if we click back on our HDRI itself, we have the assignment that we can assign different HDRI images, and we include several in this plugin as well that you can work with. So you can find those really easily if you just type 4K. And it'll bring up some of the ones that we provide by default, like the Autumn Hockey is a really nice one. Take a second to load. So you get some environments that you can start to play around with yourself and start to check out. And I'll show how to get rid of some of the skewing and stuff in a second. But there's a really cool website like HDRI Haven provides a lot of these for free, and I reference that in the docs as well, so you can pick up some more there. Some of the other things too, I'm going to go back to my other one. If we add in you can adjust the intensity for some of these HDRI images as well. So you can set up different lighting conditions and get that actual look that you like. For some of the ones as well, like here for size, you can scale the size of that mesh dome that we're using or whatever it is to set up that projection. And then the next one down here is the projection center. So you can punch in direct values if you'd like, but the preferred method is we actually have this little gizmo here that you can drag up and down, and some of that skewing that we saw when it's really low, as we start to scale it up, we can start to see that some of those trees and some of that background starts to blend, and depending on the camera's perspective that you choose, that can really help you to align it and get some of that skewing off. And then, I feel like this is Dude, Where's My Car? And I'm just going, and then, if anyone remembers that movie.
And using that size scaler there is better than, you don't want to scale the actual mesh, right?
Well, that's what that's just doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's scaling the mesh. Yeah, you don't want to, it's better not to scale the mesh itself, use the projection center. It's still going to move the same way. But
okay.
Like there looks like it's like as I scale up, it's also scaling up the gizmo and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the better option is to use the projection method, or the projection 3D gizmo that we have here. But I've just now added a directional light as well, so we can see that we do get that shadow casting. And one of the next settings down here is that can be really useful to start, because depending on your HDRI image, you want to find a good intensity value that works. But you also want to find a light value that works for your directional light. And you want those to blend more seamlessly with the back. So with the background here, so it's like using the lighting distance factor here, we can actually adjust this and choose how much of that how that light is actually blending, the area that is actually shadowing around the camera. And then there's just some other options here, like for camera projection, if you don't really care about, like you can still get the shadow casting, but the camera projection is just projecting to the camera itself, so no matter what direction you look, it's not based on the projection center, and it's not of that 3D gizmo and everything. So, but, one of the bigger questions that we get asked that I see this come up often as well is like is around HDRI setup. So when people import their own HDRI images, there tends to be some issues that they'll run into sometimes. So I don't have to go through the content browser. I'm just gonna search. I'll actually go ahead and apply and show you what it would look like screwed up, and then we'll fix it. So I've got one that I've brought in already. Small hanger. So with this one, you'll notice that the background is like really blurry and really fuzzy. And it just doesn't look quite right. It looks like you almost have like a camera setup with some depth of field going on. So one thing we can do is we can open up that cube map image, and there's a couple of settings in here that we'll want to go ahead and change. Like for instance, you'll notice that the max in-game size is showing as 512 by 512, which is really low compared to the 4K that I imported it as. So if we look for size, we can see the maximum texture size is 0, which is just defaulting to that 512. So what I'm going to do is 49.6, and it's going to give a second, and it's going to process that. Maybe just another second too. Because it is cube map, it does take it just a moment to go through its process. And then once that comes back, there's one other setting that we'll want to adjust, which is the MIP generation settings. We want to make sure that we are telling the engine not to use any MIP maps, because at the distances that these things are being rendered, we don't want to make sure that blending is not happening, because we want it to always be really sharp.
And that means that it will have a larger memory footprint.
Yes.
Than a traditional.
But I mean, it's still a cube map, so there is some optimizations that the engine does. It's not like importing a 8K texture on a landscape and telling it never to have any MIP levels.
Okay.
So maybe I froze it.
Maybe you did. Those things happen.
Is there any questions that have come up real quick? And I can try and dive in those and give this another minute, and I may just need to.
We have a couple.
Oh, there it goes.
Okay.
Right back I'm going to ignore your questions now.
Yes.
So if we type in MIP here, we can go to the MIP gen settings, and then by default, it's always going to be from texture. So we can just go and set that to no MIP maps. And then again, that'll take just a second. And then once we save, close this. And now we've got that nice sharp background that we expected.
Yeah.
So that's one thing that's a hang-up that I see a lot of people go through, especially with importing HDRI images. You know, I recently covered that in this doc specifically. I think I updated it somewhere else as well. We've never really kind of covered cube maps in general, like to go like in detail and in depth about some of these little hang-ups. So that's something that we definitely want to try and get to. So let's see here. Let me knock that off so I can move that to movable, so I can always not see that preview lighting. So one of the other things as well that I want to show is with regard to reflections. And actually, I'm going to get out of the hanger here, and I'm going to go back to my open scene, because you can see the sky and the clouds and everything. So one of the things that is you want to have nice reflections from the HDRI and the whole environment in general. I'm going to turn off screen space reflections. Oh, excuse me, so that we can see the reflections from the cube map directly. So screen space reflections disabled. Then come over here, and if I select my HDRI backdrop and I'm going to select the skylight, One of the things you'll notice is the QMap resolution is 128. It's always a power of 2, but 128 is the default that we use. And even though you have this high, we've made the HDRI show up really nice and crisp, we may want to show the resolution in reflections to be something higher as well.
Okay.
So this is going to be memory intensive, so it's like, you wouldn't necessarily want to set it for like 2048 or 4096 for in-game purposes, for everything, but for product visualization and for these kind of quick one-offs, it is something that can be beneficial here to get that high quality. So if we go to the project settings, and then we're going to search for resolution, you'll notice that reflection capture resolution is in here. I've already got it set to 4096. It's one of those things, again, it takes it just a second to process. And something to be very cautious about when setting this value. In this project, I'm only using it for this scene, but 4096 would be applied to any reflection captures in the scene. Our reflection captures do not have like a specific setting that you can set a resolution per reflection capture, whereas the skylight does. So. But just so you know, reflection captures under the rendering settings, and you can set that there. And then if I come in here, and I'm just going to use 2048. And let me tell you, this works so much better like ray tracing, because like we're tracing like all the rays for the reflections, and it's just night and day difference. It's really kind of cool. But you may not see it like on this surface as well. But actually, you know what? Let me just add a chrome ball. There. Yeah, there we go, my chrome material.
That's the material you usually use to.
Yeah, this is just a very basic material. Usually just call it like a chrome ball, and it's just a constant 1 plugged into the color for white and then for metallic as well, so it's fully metallic. And then just set roughness to 0 for with a constant there, and you have like this fully reflective material. So if I come in here and I adjust the skylight's resolution back, let's just say 64, you can start to see really that difference. So if we go back to 128 for the, probably helps to be a little closer too. Because like a lot of the product visualization stuff I see is like you have these really slow pan cameras that are going near a surface, and you want that really high quality there. So 2048, and you can start to see those details around the tree line and everything start to really pop into those details with the clouds as well. And get rid of that. And then I think the only other thing I really want to show off on this, I just really wanted to show off just kind of this quick setup of working with this, and it's just you can just toss these HDRIs in, and you can just use that or the projection gizmo and just adjust your scene for whatever the HDRI is. And then one of the things that I don't see a lot of people talking about or using really very often is we have these components here for a rotating movement. And these are really quick, so you don't have to set anything up in Blueprint. You can just attach them to your actor. And then up here you have some values for rotation rate. By default, it's like 180 is on the Z, but I think this is like the Y maybe. I do -25. And then if I play, oh, you know what? You got to set it to movable first, because static objects will not move that way. And then you can get those nice little panning rotations. And then once you start adding a cinematic camera or something like that, you can start working with that depth of field and some other camera exposure values and everything. So it's really kind of interesting. While I set up the next part, is there any questions on this that have kind of come in?
We had one regarding HDRI. Can you use this HDRI image like a green screen backdrop in 3D space?
I've not tried it and not sure.
Yeah. You can definitely make it green.
Yeah, you can definitely. Yeah, let me share that real quick. Because we provide like a gray, we have a gray texture. But I mean, yeah, you can make it totally whatever color you want. I mean,
And I've seen
So-
some in-engine mixed reality solutions as well, where they use just a fully, one value green material, and they're able to use that as for the chroma key.
Yeah.
And you can see something similar too when you do the high resolution screenshot, and you enable use custom depth as mask. You can actually see.
Well, okay, so like I was doing a little bit around composure back around the Unreal Academy stuff, and I had to make my own little green screen in the editor. So, it's like, had this actually been something I was working with at the time, I probably would have used this, and that would actually probably be a good little use case, because I only had like a character standing there and doing an animation.
Okay.
And I needed just to have that green screen and just be able to catch the shadows. And
Yeah,
just be able
and
to put
this
it
would be
into my,
all green, right?
and I just need to do that burnout is all I need to do, and yeah, that would actually work. So, yeah, not original intended purpose, I guess, but it's kind of cool. It's like that's the one thing I do love, is like you can always work with these other kind of things with it. But I guess we can move on to the next one. Let's look at from material expressions. This is one of our new material features that came out, and let me find my map. Let's save that. All right, so I set up like a little example map here. It is not in content examples, by the way. This is just my own little map I threw together over the last couple of days, here and there. So, actually even set up like some nice little bookmarks to jump to. So, with from material expressions, this is a new shading model that we've provided that enables you to have multiple shader or shading models in a single material. And there's bunch of different use cases that you can use it for. So it's like you can use it to have more than one material. Like on this one, for instance, here I'm using clear coat with the carbon fiber material under it, and then I've got a leather material right here.
Okay.
So that's just one use case, because like before you would have to set up like multiple material slots. You'd have to actually assign those polygons to be a certain material element, and then you assign that material, and it's like they're both like their own separate shader instructions and draw calls.
Yeah.
But now you can have a single draw call with these multiple shaders in a single material. And let me share real quick, in case anyone doesn't know about clear coat, because I use that throughout this this little example map. So clear coat requires that you enable a project setting. So if you go into the rendering settings under materials and you look for clear coat enable second normal, and just enable that, you'll have to restart the project, but that gives you that second normal, so that way we can have the clear surface and just find a roughness there, and then have a normal map under it for the carbon fiber. Let's see here. Just in case anyone ever wanted to use it. Yeah, so let's open up this, and I'm going to show you how this kind of works, and then we'll look at some of the other examples and how you can use it for not specifically having multiple shaders be on a single model, but use it for like quality switches, if switches, and other things depending on a platform or something that you're going for. So let me open up my material here, and it works really well too with material instances. None of that stuff breaks. The only thing that you have to be mindful of is you can't change the material type or the shading model in the material. We wouldn't be able to change that here, because it's just going to silently fail, and it'll just always take the base parent. That's just something to be mindful of with material instance. But let's open up my parent material here. So first thing you're going to want to do is over here in the material details under material shading model, we're going to come down here and we're going to select the from material expression. And since this material is already set up, this is already covered in the docs, so I didn't bother trying to go through. I was like, let's walk through just connecting nodes, because that can be boring to watch. But the use shading models we have over here, this actually lists all the shading models that we are actually using in this material graph. So if I zoom out and I just see the simple material that I've got set up here, we can see that the clear coat and default lit are the two shading models that I've used. If I add another shading model here, we have a shading model node, and I select that, and let's just say I were to add subsurface to this as well. And come back and select this. We've now got those three are all selected. So I can see, it's a quick way to identify, if a material is using multiple shader models and what it is, or shading models and what it is using. So the only downside I'll say to that right there is it doesn't tell you what's actually hooked up. It just tells you that it's referencing it in the material. So that's something to be aware of too. But in this one, just to give you an idea, it's like the top one up here is the default lit shading model. And all it is setting up the leather material that I'm using, the set material attributes. So you can use that, or you can use the make material attributes nodes. I like the set because I can specify actually, exactly which ones attributes that I want to use, and I can plug my shading model into the shading model input here. And then I've got the same setup down here for the clear coat, and all of our secondary normals are being driven through that output. And again, it's the same thing, except we've added on the clear coat roughness and the options here for that, and plugging in the shading model. And then everything else is being driven by our blend material attributes node here and the alpha mask that I choose. So depending on the alpha mask that is chosen, it can determine how that is laid out on your UVs for the mesh. So if I were to come in here, and I think there's another one called default. By the way, there's another mask in there. We have a lot of engine material stuff. Sorry, I can't find that right now, but it would change out the mask for what is actually covering on the material that we have there. It's not a requirement to use the material attributes node. If you're not familiar with that workflow, you can actually enable and disable it here using the use material attributes. The default is the main material node that we have here that has all of our inputs and everything. But working with the different shading models, if you want them to be completely separate paths and have their own information and things that we set up, this kind of workflow works really well because you can, again, specify exactly what you need for that material and that shading model that we're going for. So let me Control-Z that. And then let's look at some of the other ones, because I find those, this is really cool, and this part, and it's really nice. But as far as practical use goes, I've got some other examples up here, for instance, the if statements here are going to drive. So this is my base material that is set up, and it's just it's using the if statement. It's just an A is greater than B, or A is equal to B, or A is less than B option in the material. And I'm driving these two through material instances. So even though my base material is this over here, I can just set up a parameter that is calling this one, and I can quickly change what that material is doing with its alpha just based on a parameter that I'm changing in the material instance, and I can drive that. So let me drag this off over here. But so setting a 1 or a 0, it's something that you can quickly do with this.
And that's in case you have a master and then you have different.
Yeah, I always like master materials.
Yep.
They're easier to work with, especially if you have a lot of things where you want to control a bunch of different parameters.
It also makes it easier to, if you want to do an update to pretty much your entire project, you have a master material that almost everything is inheriting from, and then.
Yes, exactly. So with this one, everything in that, and I'll talk to Victor after this. It's I'm planning on just kind of tossing this up on the forum for a sample project, so you guys can dive in and just look at what I've got here, without me having to go in. It's oh man, you didn't cover this one exact thing that I wanted to see on the graph or something else. So, but again, this is just an if statement, and each one of these examples is I do call out and highlight what this is and what it's doing. So. But all of that is just being controlled right here just through this parameter, and then we're determining whether the shading model is default lit or clear coat.
Okay.
And it's being driven by the alpha here. So if we get the equal, then it's driven more by the alpha, and we're splitting it there. If we go less than, we're falling just onto clear coat. which is where we get just the full clear coat with the blue carbon here, versus the split alpha, like the first material or the no carbon. So, and I've done examples here for each of the ones that we do have in the that we do use. The quality switch is a really cool one too. Same kind of thing with logic setup. We'll look at logic and then I'll show you how we can use that in the editor. Oh, I didn't select the mesh. So we have the quality switch here, and then for this one you can choose based on your texture or quality levels that are set for the engine that you choose. You can choose whether it's using whatever shading model. So in this one, it's clear coats using all of them except for low. I'm switching back to a default lit. So if I go up here to settings, and then actually I had it on low. That didn't look right. Give me 1 second, it'll switch over.
Let the PC do its job.
Yep.
That's why they're useful. They can do things without us having to pay attention. We can talk about fun things while they're
like right now.
While they're working. Yeah, like right now, trying to come up with fun things to talk about.
You just talk in circles and just hope that it comes back up right.
Yeah.
No.
Or like I said, just toss it.
There we go.
It might be time for a restart of the live stream PC.
You know, and I specifically came down and did all these compiles of shaders earlier, and it's
well, you can see there that
it goes much faster.
Yeah.
Using the high, you can see that everything is defaulting to the clear coat, which is what we had in the material, versus switching to the low, and everything just really quickly. Oh, come on, it was compiled. There we go. Falling back to that default lit only. So let's go back to high, and we'll look at the next example. All right, so on this one is a feature level switch. So on this one, what it's showing off is, you know, in the settings here, if we're using like SM5 or if we're using SM4 or something from mobile like 3.1 or OGL 3.1 or ES 3.1. And you can see here that we've got the Android 3.1 versus shader model 5. So if I go back to shader model 5, this one should change. Let me select this guy. It's the same kind of thing here, where you're controlling that shading model and choosing which one that we want that higher end on, and then we want that fallback on for the lower.
And this is something that's getting more and more like if you want to ship on different devices, different platforms, you're going to have to think about these things, right? Because some of these shader features are too expensive to run on lower end devices.
Yeah. So it just goes back to that master material kind of mentality. Is like you don't have to do dual materials and go, okay, well, I'm shipping on this platform. I need to make sure this material is assigned here and takes this into account. I mean, granted, we've had options in the past as well, but it's like now you can absolutely choose different shading models to go with it. Same for the shader path switch. Since I'm going to provide this, I'm not going to open just to show the same thing. The static bool again is the same kind of thing. I'll show the. I thought I had the material instance on this one. So the other one with the clear coat is the base material versus the one over here that's default lit. It's just, we're just controlling everything through a static bool and saying yes or no for clear coat. So these are things that you can really kind of control through that master material, and it's really awesome. So one thing that does come up, and let me open this material. I've seen this a couple of times, and if you select the shading model here, and you go to look at all the shading models that we provide, the one that you see that is missing immediately is unlit. There's a lot of information that gets compiled out for unlit materials, and essentially it's like having it there right now it's theoretically possible to do it, and that's up to the programmer, if it ever gets implemented. But it's something that right now, if we've just gone, okay, yeah, we'll just implement that, it can potentially provide a lot of regressions, and we try and prevent that, or at least give fair warning when we're going to do it.
Yeah.
So it's just in case. You're like, man, I really wanted to have that unlit and then have my default lit as well. But
we can't have all the nice things.
Sometimes. It's called ray tracing. All right. I didn't know if you want to take like a little break before I jump into the next one, because like this one's gonna be a little bit longer because I've got two in the same map that we'll kind of dive into.
We have some questions that are related to materials.
Okay.
We can go over them. How is dual shading materials different than layering materials?
You know, I'm not a complete material guy, so
I think they're referring to material layering.
Are we talking like, because we have material layering, the system, which is experimental. We also have like material layer blending,
Okay.
which is, you know, just blending of materials. We do that with like landscapes, and then really like a lot of the use case that we're doing with this one is we're saving draw calls, and that's very important on mobile for a lot of things. And you know, I mean, Fortnite drives a lot of development, and if we can save draw calls, man, draw calls are
and
like a big thing. Like across the board, it's a big thing. I mean, imagine even with your experience in VR.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. Is
Heavy, especially on mobile.
Yeah,
It's a very low number that people
Yeah.
should go, what?
Yeah, I mean, you're not always developing to the lowest common denominator, but you got to keep it in mind.
Yeah.
You know, there's things there that you want to always. You don't want to just, you know, willy-nilly just kind of like, yeah, we'll just make everything high performance and not take that into account, because it's a lot of work to go and backpedal.
Yeah, it is one of the more expensive processes to run in terms of the rendering pipeline.
Yeah.
And it can add up real quick.
Yes. I know that doesn't fully answer your question.
Fortunately
but,
not. We'll see if we can get back to it. They were wondering what's more performant, separate materials with different shader models or a single material with multiple shader models?
This is going to be better. I haven't done profiling or performance on everything, but you're still taking into account your shader instructions there. They are now in one material. So I guess if you make like a super, I'm just speculating on this, like if you're making like a super expensive material, and you're having multiple shader models there, I mean, it may be a hit, but it's like I haven't done any comparisons, so I can't say for example. But again, you're one less draw call.
Yeah.
So
I think they were wondering though, like you were mentioning earlier, what you would have to do is to, you know, have separate master materials for different platforms. And I think leaving out the one instruction of checking which one you've selected, that is probably less instructions.
Yeah.
So, but sometimes you also have to, like, there's a trade-off there, right? Because now you have increased the scope of what you need to change depending on which platform you're packaging for. And so sometimes it's worthwhile, you know, thinking of the longer scope of the project. You can do a small performance trade-off that increases the you know, efficiency of how you work in the project.
Yep.
And and if there's a lot of people, it can get a little trickier to make sure that everyone, this was you know.
Well, y'all are covering it next week, and you know, it's like with the virtual texturing. You know, with that one specifically, there is a trade-off. You know, it's like it's not like just convert everything to virtual texturing and we're golden. You know, it's like there is a trade-off because like you are getting more instruction counts in your material. So it's just finding that balance of what works for your project.
Yeah.
So.
See, and then there was one more question, which
Go ahead and open up my next map, and then we'll have that ready.
You can do that. Okay. Do multiple shader models work on forward renderer?
I have not done any testing on forward renderer.
I'm not sure either. That's a good question, though.
I haven't used forward renderer in quite a while, actually.
I use it almost.
Do you?
Yeah, every time. Yeah, VR,
Then
especially mobile VR, it looks so much better.
I know we try to keep those aligned, you know, where possible, and it's like it should. Like my assumption would be, it's like I was never given any information. It's like, oh, hey, it doesn't work over here. So I imagine if it's working on mobile, you know, it's
I'm
like,
about to convert to 4.2.3 really soon, so I'll actually go ahead and make sure I follow
like
up.
I don't know if clear code is supported on forward. That's something I'm not sure on. But and I know I use it extensively in this, but I wouldn't imagine it would be a problem for any of the other shading models that we have. There should be no limitations there.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy to test too.
Yeah.
All right, I think that was it on materials.
Okay. All right, so I ripped out like a map from content examples. I'm going to ignore that for the moment. We're going to come over here to dual fog. And then let me speed up my camera so I can get over here.
Is that a shift scroll wheel, right? Shift scroll wheel to speed up the camera when you're...
right click on the right mouse button.
Right mouse button.
Yeah, right mouse button, and then just
Scroll.
like roll that thing forward until you.
I think it's while you're moving the camera, though.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, while you're moving the camera. Yeah. But even still, that has like a maximum value. So it's like I like to adjust the camera speed over here if I have larger levels.
Yeah, and they're two independent ones. You're actually
Yeah.
not controlling that camera speed when you're doing the scroll, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it has its own multiplier within
Yeah.
the way. Anyways, thanks, Victor, for the distractions.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let me get it down here. And let me rip out this details panel. I'm gonna put it over here. I'm gonna scrunch this down so we have a little bit more real estate on the screen. And actually,
This is one of my. I saw Chris Murphy uploading a. I think it was one of the first preview one, and he was showing off a little bit of dual high fog.
was he?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see here. I've already got one set up here, and I'm gonna go through some of the parameters, and we'll just kind of work backwards. I wanted to show it set up because it's for me it's a lot of just adjusting until I get the look that I want, or just kind of bouncing around. Like this one's for me, this one's a little weird to show off in the sense that it's like you can't just say it's like the values that I have here are specific to this example that I'm showing because it's a really large like thing that is painted together really quickly. As soon as the fog goes away, you see how badly it's painted by me. So it's like you may just need to start tweaking around some of the settings and just kind of find what's worked. And I can't drag a second height fog in here because it doesn't play well together. So we have this second fog data thing. So whenever you add an exponential height fog to your level, you have this now secondary data that we work from. And what this is doing is it's enabling us to have this nice fog atmosphere throughout the level itself that we don't want to get rid of necessarily. Like for instance, without fog altogether. And then the secondary data, I can actually control a secondary layer here to have some of these lower lying areas, like these peaks and valleys and stuff, kind of stand out on their own, and I can adjust some of the height fall off and how it starts to look for those areas. And this is where I was trying to get at, is like it's a little harder to give specific, like use this setting and you'll be perfect. But what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna delete this and then just we'll drag it in. We'll just play around and we'll get it working again.
Sounds good.
So as I fumble my way through it, please be aware. Fog. So if we go over here to the modes panel, look for fog. I'm just gonna drag a height fog in here. I'm just gonna place it. So one thing with the fog actor is it's an actor in your level. So depending on where you place it as well may determine. So it's like if you have a lot of elevated places and a lot of lower lying areas, these values are going to be completely arbitrary, and it's just you're going to have to find ones that work for your level. So I can't give you an exact answer on those, but I can show you how to fiddle with them. So if we go over here to the details panel, again we have our fog density. And then let me look at my notes here because like I was kind of jotting out like how I started playing around with this. So adjusting the, I typically start by starting out with the low value of the fog density itself. So I can kind of bring that down. And then with the fog height fall off, I would bring that down as well because that starts to raise up my level and I start to get some of that haziness that I want to see. And then the next thing is we're going to start with the secondary fog density. So there's no secondary fog at all now, but it's like as I start to just ramp this up, you can start to see it start to fill in a little bit and become a little bit thicker. So I've got on here like start with any value on that. For this specific level, I'm going to lower my again, this is a really massive like landscape that I just painted. I didn't even like take into account like the size of it, like scale to a person. So I have to go like really low on like negative 31,000 or something like that on the height offset. So that way that fog is that secondary layer is lowering down and becoming a little more dense. And then got on here Next thing, if I adjust, yeah, if I start to get a low value, I can start to thicken up that secondary fog. And then the opacity level here, I can start to bring this down, and what we start to see is it's lowering the opacity on the rest of like the fog. So you can see the atmosphere starts to come back. I can start to see some of the sun again. And then I just kind of play around, and it's like as I start to do that, you can see I can start to get some of the fog and this a little bit.
There's always
Sorry.
a bit of
I
tweaking.
I told you this one
Yeah.
was just like, you know, tweak it until it looks right for you kind of thing. Like here, if I just go back and punch in my values, and again, this will be here for everyone to kind of play around with too. So, sorry, this one's just kind of like the weirdest to show off specifically for me. Yeah. For
So you do have some magical values for
I do
this scene.
for this scene.
Yeah.
Yes, I wrote them down so that way it's like I'd remember. I don't trust my memory. 0.7. That's around that, anyways. And then a low value for the secondary for this one, and I was increasing this. And then I started to bring this up. Okay, what did I do? I think I broke something that I had.
Is it because you moved the
I might have.
location of the actor?
Yeah, it might be it.
Quick way to sort of fix. If you ever come across a similar thing, you mess with the values and you're like, no, I want the
I love
original
slider
ones.
values, man. It's like,
Yeah. You can reload the level unless you saved.
you know what? I'll just reload and go back to what my default was.
Same thing, right?
Yeah, same thing, right? I think I inadvertently broke something in it, but it's not to say it's specifically that. But I was most nervous about showing that one off anyway. Like, I mean, it works. It's just like for me, it's again, it's just like finding the values that work for this level. So, world outliner.
Yeah, finding values that works. It's also, you know, subjective to what you personally think looks good, right?
Yep. Like this one was really, you know, just more like thick fog, and it's just it's nice to have these secondary layers, but again, it's just, you know, kind of find your values that work for you. And I'm just gonna drop this one at this point, and we'll go look at the landscape stuff.
Next.
Next. Oh yeah, same map. Duh. Okay, so let me slow my camera speed down again so I can move reasonable speed. All right, so this is, I ripped this straight out of the content examples. But in this one, so let's look at the Foliage Tool. So if we go to the Foliage Tool here, let's crunch that up. We have pretty much all of our actors that we paint into the world, and those become these instant static meshes that we can use, and they get clustered together and everything. But, you know, one of our, like some of our artist requests have always been they want to be able to paint these objects in the world without that they've created. So they have these interactive like blueprints that they've created, and I'll show you one that I've got in a second. But you know, it's like if we think about like the trees from Fortnite, for instance, you know, those are interactive things that you can destroy. And our artists, as they go through and they want to be able to paint these trees, you want to be able to paint them with intention and to be able to selectively move them, and you don't want to have to worry about going back. So it's like if you have like actors that you place in the world manually around, they're not if you go and edit your landscape, those aren't always taken into account. So it's like you have to go back and you have to manually adjust them, tweak them and everything. Whereas if I started editing this landscape and painting it and sculpting it or whatever, those instances of the trees, they take into account the normal and the bias and all that stuff.
Right.
And I don't have to worry about intentionally going back. So it's like they automatically move and everything with it. So being able to use the Foliage tool now for this to paint whatever my blueprint actors are, it's just like this really awesome power to quickly throw something together in prototype or to have for finalized assets. So one of the things that I've created here is a little wind turbine for these little small things. So I'm going to show you how to add this. So to add your own instance actor, or need to avoid the word instance because these are not instanced in any way. These are just like placing standard actors. So under the actor foliage type, if we go into here and we choose actor foliage, and then I'm going to do here, I'm going to leave it as new actor foliage. Then under my content browser, what I now have is this new actor, and what you'll see here is all this, not all the settings, but the majority of the settings that we get with the normal foliage actors themselves if we were to select them in the Foliage tool. So you get things like all your yaw asset or your yaw rotate random yaw options, how it's rotated, what type of ground slope you can paint onto, the type of mobility you want to give it, light map resolutions, all those important settings. And all you have to do is go up here and whatever your blueprint is that you've created. So for me, I've got the demo world turbine here that I've created. So I've created this like nice little green thing to go with my landscape, and all it is just it's a blueprint, and it's like I've got some rotating blades on it, so it's an interactive kind of thing that happens. Come back over here, and then if I search for my blueprint, so my demo world wind turbine that I've got, I assign that, and I save this. Drag that off to the side for a second. Now I'm going to go back to my Foliage tool.
Can you also just drag your actor in there like you do normally with a static mesh when you add it to your sort of foliage library?
I didn't try that, but we can see real quick, and if you break it, it's your fault.
No, don't think so.
It did not give me that option, so, and it didn't freeze up the machine, so that's good. But I've got my instance here, so I'm going to select this. I'm going to deselect that one so I don't paint twice. And then some of those settings and everything too that are contained, you could still edit them here in the panel if you'd like.
And they'll actually edit the asset.
Yeah, everything updates back and forth. So I can choose my scaling. I can choose. I'm actually going to, because I'm going to choose the ground slope. I'm going to make that some obscene ground slope. And move my content browser back off. And I'm gonna, oh, whoops, not that. Let me remove some of these trees, and we're gonna replace them with wind turbines. So now I can just start painting all of these all over the place. And the one thing you'll notice, again, this is, since we do have like all those foliage settings, the align to normal is not something that I want to do with these. So if I just erase those and repaint them again, I now have all of my wind turbines, and they're all facing in random yaws, which, again, should have remembered that one. I didn't like that. Let's do them all the same. And there we go. Paint them all the same direction so they catch the wind right. And then as I go and play, we have all these things playing in time. And what you'll notice here as well is that since these are all individual static mesh actors, like, and they have that same rendering cost to them as well. So it's like the more you paint, like these are doing like on tick, just a rotation of the blade. But it's like that performance cost can add up. So you need to be mindful of it. But at the same time, it's like it's one of these things. You now have the power of the Foliage tool, with these actors that you've created in Blueprint. And the other thing too is like, because they're all individual actors, you'll notice some are spinning faster than others and some are slower. They're not all spinning the same speed. You know, this is all just stuff set up in Blueprint, you know, to have that random
and it can
generation.
give you
And because they're individual instances.
Yeah. You can have interactivity with them, which is really neat. And you don't have to build your own sort of construction script to procedurally add them to the world.
Yes,
you can
exactly.
just use a tool that already exists.
Yeah, you can really empower your artists to kind of go through and do these own kind of edits and tweaks with things that they've been provided, and they can do their job more effectively, right?
Yeah.
So.
And the way it's set up, I love how they have a relationship to the landscape.
Yes. So, yeah, let me stop that, and then, yeah, again, you know, that same kind of thing. We can just control everything, and artists don't have to sit there and worry about, you know, going back and doing other little tweaks to account for whatever the changes in art direction that came for a landscape.
Because there could be, you know, a slope that we want them to actually be able to walk up. It's too sharp, and then doing a little edit there and having to check everything around it.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the gist of everything I wanted to show. If there's questions coming in, we can try and dive into those.
Let's try. There are a lot of questions that are coming in that are, I'm afraid, a little too specific. We did touch on some of the chaos ones in our previous live stream, and so if you have questions specific to chaos, 2 weeks ago we did a live stream on chaos fundamentals.
I still want to try chaos. I haven't had the time yet.
It's a lot of fun. It's cool.
Like anyone who has followed me like over the years, like I used to do a lot of stuff for like the Apex destruction stuff that we had, and it's like I'll get hit up with questions occasionally here for chaos stuff, and I'm like, oh man, I haven't messed with it.
I want to reproduce a test I did that back in the day with Apex. I built an entire level that was all destructible meshes, and it was for VR, which leads to some problems because you can't bake shadows on them because they're dynamic. And I was able to get it to run, but it was extremely limiting in terms of what I would how I was able to design my level, and I'm curious what I'd be able to do with chaos. Obviously, I won't be able to break the entire level in one go, which would have been awesome.
I'm gonna have to learn some of it because like the integration with Niagara. It's
watch the stream we did 2 weeks ago. Jack walks us through fields and sort of all of the other fundamental concepts that you need to learn now because this is a new system. It's a new tool.
Fun times, man.
Yeah, and then I really want to try the caching where you can make a really cool large simulation and then not pay the real-time performance cost of having to compute what each chunk is supposed to do, and so you can get some cool real-time cinematics using sequencer.
And I'm gonna say I gotta get it set up at home.
Yeah, and if you're wondering, you're still required to use the source build of the engine to be able to use Chaos until it comes out of beta, and so that includes the example project that we have under the Learn tab on the launcher. It doesn't work in binary just yet, and that is to make sure that we're not, we don't want to prevent people to update to a new engine version because we removed the parity with a system that we had previously. But Chaos will get there, and at that point, it will be out in binary as well, and you'll be able to just download it and use it. Let's see what we have here. The changes take into account the slope changes too. Yes.
Yeah.
That's what they do. Let's see. Can we have multiple?
Well, let's see if the slope changes. Because, sorry. I hate saying yes and then. Because, I know we're setting it in a thing, so let's select this real quick.
This is one monitor window,
I know,
window
man, I'm spoiled
management.
by my two monitors. So let me change that back to put that back on 45. And that's painting, so it doesn't look like it.
So the intention here is that they should disappear once you edit it?
And it's I don't think there's that kind of interaction between the two because you have two systems here. You have the landscape that's just reading information, and then the Foliage Tool, which is taking information for what is being painted. Okay. So it's not going back, and if I change the slope, it's not dynamically changing any of the instances that were previously painted. Because I had to do that earlier. It's I painted a bunch of stuff, and then I changed the slope, and I had to go back and repaint. Okay. So they painted more on the side of the mountain.
If that happens though, and there's one you don't think looks good, like I say the one on the edge there,
But yeah, we
you
have
can select the individual one.
Yeah, so yeah, that's one of the cool things I do like too. And that's one of the things we do call out in the docs, and I think even in the release notes is you can now do this select all. You could do this before, but you can select these individual instances. Go, oh, okay, I don't like that guy.
Yeah.
See ya.
Yeah, that was nice. I remember having to make a really small brush just to be able to delete an individual one. Let's see. Can we have multiple foliage variations? I don't see it as an object in a level. Or can we defoliage, kind of bake it to regular static meshes objects? They are actors in the scene. I think he's referring to, the
Foliage. Now, yeah, these are individual, because like that's the one thing is, like for instance, these trees. If I select them, you see how they're all clustered. Because that's all instance foliage that is painted. These are individual actors that are being painted. They're just using the foliage tool.
Sort of piggybacking on the foliage tool.
Delete, break references. Yeah, I don't want to break references. So.
You should avoid trying to break references.
But that's actually, look at this. This is actually one of the cool things too. See, you ask questions that I don't normally try occasionally. You know, it's like I didn't write documentation for this. I didn't work with this until this stream. So, you know, I was sitting there, I was asking other people. I was like, hey, you know, what's all the ins and outs of this, and like how do I work with it so we could be prepared for this? And but yeah, that's actually cool. It's like because they are individual instances or individual actors in the scene, just painted. You know, you can grab them and just you can have that little bit of fine control and go back and move them too.
You can't do that with even if you select.
I can select this, but I don't get the gizmo.
Right.
So you don't get that option. The only thing you can do is if I move the landscape, they'll move and they'll update to the new location, but that's it.
That's neat. Let's see. Will the actors work with the grass node?
I don't mess with the grass node. I haven't.
Not sure. I mean, if you're using the grass node.
I know the grass node is part of the material.
And then you can sort of procedurally add foliage, right? I'm not sure. It's a good question.
I mean, the grass node's all material based, right? It's like you paint your mask or whatever, and whatever type. Like for instance, like on this one, is like if I wanted it only to show up on the grass, it's only showing up on the grass, not the dirt. And I think that's just whatever it's painted onto, right? So I'm having to speculate on that.
Yeah. Can chaos destroy blueprint actors added via the foliage tool? That should be relatively easy to test. I'm not sure.
Chaos?
Right.
I know nothing about chaos.
Right. That's why I'm bringing it up as a topic of conversation, which actually is kind of cool if that works, because you'd be able to use the foliage tool. Considering that the wind turbines there, they are actors in the world. Now they do have a special relationship that a normal actor, if you just dropped it into the scene, wouldn't have, right? However, I don't think there should be any reason why they wouldn't be able to do that.
I think pretty much if you can include it into a blueprint,
which you can. Yeah. Let's see.
But again, these are all individual actors being placed, so you have to take into consideration your that kind of performance cost. And it's like the more you populate the scene, the more draw calls you're going to have, the more performance. You know, it's not like, you know, they're not instance actors.
Yeah, they're not.
Don't go crazy.
They don't receive sort of the performance benefit of why we use the foliage tool for large forests and rocks and such. Can we find a list of only foliage in a scene? Do these actors are they added to your world outline or not?
No, they're not. Well, I don't think these are. I think they're. We'll find out in a second. No, they're not.
They're just part of the foliage. Yeah. Oh, actually, you're searching for F there. So I'm not seeing.
Yes. No, they're not.
They're not. So they are part of the
multiple
foliage family.
They're like I've got. Let's see here. Like there's 14 of those instances, or those actors placed.
And you can select. I think you can select all of them there. You know, right? If you select the actual asset there, I think right-click, select all instances.
Oh yeah.
Right. That's how you can get all of them.
And then select all. That selects everything. Gotcha.
because everything.
I need the hand user controls. You know more about Foliage Tool than I do.
Last time I painted foliage was quite a while ago. Alpha texture doesn't work too well in VR and can get really expensive really fast. So it tends to be. I guess I haven't done many forests in general in a long time. Let's see. There's a question about cloth simulation, the state of it. We don't have any updates there.
We did fix some errant errors in the page the other day. That's about as much interaction with the cloth stuff I've had recently.
Let's see. They were asking if we're working on different types of fogs. We have the atmospheric fog, and then we have the height fog. Yep. Differences there. Not too familiar with atmospheric, but the height fog you can turn on. You can make it volumetric, and as you saw, we can sort of. It's almost like a fog. You can make it look like a fog of war.
Right.
Yeah.
So like that's one cool thing is like the thicker you make it too, it's like you can actually save some performance because like it makes the background as like scene color.
Okay.
Like it just whatever the color is that's driving that. So because essentially it's going off the depth buffer. So anything beyond that point, so it's like if you set like a distance that's relatively, let's just say 10,000 units. Anything beyond that, they're essentially getting cold. So
okay, so they are getting cold.
So yeah, that should be the case. But like I know it falls back and it doesn't use the depth buffer at that point. There's like some note in our documentation I was looking at the other day.
Let's see. Are you going to allow for multiple foliage actors eventually, or a foliage layering system? I think what they mean is having, so you can have one section of the map being one instance foliage family.
Are you talking about like biomes or something like that, maybe?
Not really, because you can still do that. You can paint one biome in this section of the landscape and one in another. I think what they mean is being able to have one layer of instance foliage actors and then another layer. Essentially, at that time there will be a performance increase because they're not using the same system. But I think what they mean is, can they like, in effect, what you would be able to do is click on one of the trees that belongs to one layer. It will select all of the trees in that layer, and then click on another tree in another section of the landscape and then select that one. As far as I know, no, I don't think so. I'm not entirely sure what the use case would be.
Yeah, most of the foliage stuff, just for a little like background on what I know, that's all handled by our editor team. Like they have dedicated people that work on landscape and foliage and all these kind of world tools. I fall more on the rendering sides. So the dual fog stuff is like definitely more a little bit on my alley than the foliage stuff.
But I think if
it'd be cool to.
If the question is in regards to sort of collaborative work in the same map, sub-levels is what you'd want to do, right? You'd have possibly one level, that is biome summer forest, and another one that is winter forest. And then they would be two different sub-levels, and two people can work on their individual one at the same time. Will the second fog data have effect on volumetric fog and volumetric lights?
It works with volumetrics, yes. I was testing that out the other day. Yeah, because actually I'm in the map here. Let me just go and enable volumetrics really quick. Let me speed my camera back up. Okay. Oh, that's really weird. I don't know what I did to break my landscape. It made it all like Minecraft. That's interesting.
It does look like that.
It was not that way the other day.
And now they're going to want to know how you did that.
I have no idea.
I want to know how you did that.
Well, you can have the map.
Just save this one as another level.
I'll name it Victor.
I'm not sure just having the map would let me know how you got to that, but this is it. We've locked down the landscape.
Oh yeah. Made me lose train of thought. What was I going to do? Okay, fog. Let me get out of let me get back to regular mode so I can select things. Exponential height fog, and then under details, volumetric fog, and then of course I've got it like all blown out. So you have to what the directional light has to have. It's been a while since I used volumetric fog, so apologies.
It can lead to some really, really nice looking effects.
remember I used it more during like some of the Paragon stuff when we were documenting it during that time. I remember it's like, man, it was fun to just kind of play around with. Okay, cast volumetric shadow is working. Let me get back to my fog.
And that's the scattering.
Sorry, yeah, you get to watch me just mess sliders again because it's been a while since I've used it, so it's like trying to figure out where things are. Yeah, I know it's just a little bit bitty corner, but yeah, we can see some of the volumetric stuff, and it's like, again, I don't have it like properly set up, so actually let me change my directional lights. Angle, and I can probably get something better. Scale, rotation. Yeah, there we go.
And you changed it to stationary there?
It's just whatever the mobility was on when I added it. Oh no, yeah, this one I had originally had it because I was building all the lighting and everything. So yeah. I mean, that shouldn't have changed anything. The volumetric still worked. So.
Yeah, I think that's it in terms of questions that there's some about fluid simulations and large scale games, which we wouldn't be able to talk about today.
Just because it was called out on the forums, there was someone who had asked about the UV generation tools that we have with Datasmith. Those are Datasmith specific. So you have to have the plugin in for those users, but we do have some documentation on it. So
yeah,
it's really cool. This is actually something I wasn't aware of because I don't really do anything with Datasmith at this time. So
yeah, it's you can actually.
But I've been crying for like UV tools in the editor for so long that it's like it popped in and I didn't even notice.
Yeah, that's useful. As much as you can doing things in editor, it reduces the time spent in other going between softwares.
Yeah, especially for things like that. It's like, I mean, even though it's, the reason it was, probably implemented was just because like there's some tools that don't have a UV editor in them. But just being able to, make some tweaks and stuff like that within the editor is just empowers like our artists and our people that like do those things. And even if you aren't like entirely in that field, it's just being able to do some of those quick edits and stuff right there. It's like, it's so much easier.
Yeah, especially if you know what you want to do, which is edit the UVs.
Yep.
And you're not familiar with a 3D modeling tool and how to do UVs there. It helps knowing sort of the interface and
like if you put me in Maya's UV editor, it's like I'll get lost compared because I've always been like 3ds Max is what I've used, and it's like I can quickly do it there. And it's like oh, I've got to go learn it over here.
Yeah. So I think that's it in terms of the questions. If you have more of them, please use the announcement post on the forums. It's a good place on the forums to discuss specific things to the stream, and we try to follow up there and see if we can answer some of those questions as well. And I think with that, I want to thank Tim for coming over and showing off some of these things. I have a little bit things to dig into. I am excited. I do want to see, because if I can use chaos actors and the Foliage tool to paint them, so it would be a quick way to add things that can break into my into my scene. That was a good question. I'm going to see. We'll be at some point soon. I should be able, and I'll try to follow up on that on the forums as well. Whoever asked the questions. As always, if you do like us and you're streaming on Twitch, make sure that you use the category so that we can come and watch a stream. I know that during the game jam there was a lot of people streaming. It was fun to jump in and see them working on the games.
Nice.
Always enjoyed that. I forgot to mention last week, but it's worth mentioning that our Mega Jam is going to kick off in the beginning of November. And so we will have dates for that really soon, just next couple of days, I believe. We're going to lock that down. And it's the 5-year anniversary of the game jams. So we are trying our best to make it something special. And it's going to be big.
Do you usually get a lot of submissions? I'm curious.
We do. Last jam was record-breaking in terms of the mega jams are always a little bit bigger, but last jam was one of the we had the most submissions of one of the sort of normal, the other 3 throughout the year that are our normal quarterly jams.
Awesome.
And then if you want to interact with the community, make sure our forums is a good place. We visit them frequently. We also have a community-run Discord known as Unreal Stackers. You can just go to unrealstackers.org. They hit a few weeks ago, I keep saying this, but we have hit the 26,000 member mark, which is pretty impressive for a community Discord around the tool. So big thanks to everyone in the community who's running that. I know it must be quite a bit of work. We have our Facebook page. There's also a Discord, sorry, a community-run Facebook page where you can ask questions and receive answers from other people in the community. Reddit is another good place to surface your problems or just your projects. And if you want to go ahead and let us know, the forums, we have a release channel that we frequently visit, and that's where we usually find our spotlights and cool tools and plugins that people are working on. And if you saw our little countdown video, we're getting a little short now. We've repeated them a couple of times, so I would love to see another countdown video. They are 30 minutes of recorded development. Speed that up to 5 minutes. Send that without your logo embedded, but send the logo to us so that we can add it to the countdown video and get some nice music going there with our little countdown timer. And as always, follow us on social media. That's where you'll find the quickest way to receive updates on what's going on in the Unreal Engine universe. And again, thanks to Tim for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We will be back next week when we're going to be talking about virtual texturing.
Yeah.
I think it's
I won't be a part of it, but
no, but
I'll be watching. I'll watch that one.
You should, and you should too if you're interested. And we'll definitely be able to answer more of your questions around virtual texturing at that point. So without further ado, I think it's time to say goodbye for this week, and we will see you all next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.